here on this wonderfully warm afternoon. Today our main topic is going to be dedicated to Joseph Plumb Martin's life while he was here in what we now call Stockton Springs. I know most of you are familiar with his book, the narrative of a revolutionary soldier and his adventures for 7 years during the American Revolution. But today we're going to try to give you a little bit of idea of close to 60 years that he lived here in what we now call Stockton Springs. Before I start that, and with a disclaimer, I am an employee of the Stockton Marine Museum, so what I'm going to tell you next is a combination of museum employee and a member of the Historical Society when it comes to historical information. So first off, I want everyone to know that if you live in the town of Stockton Springs or Searsport, you get free admissions to the museum every day, with the exception of some special events that would be held in the evening. So make aware of that. And the museum is now, within the next few days or weeks, are actually going to be offering a couple of opportunities. And with both these opportunities, there is a discount for Stockton and Searsport residents. The first one is called Sip and Stamp. All right, this is a project is being put on by one of our college interns, and this is part of her project for college credit. Is not only having the internship at the museum, but hosting an event, developing a community event in the museum environment here. And the museum's special theme this year and next year is the sardine industry. Now, we're here in Stockton, we had sardine industry, but sardine industry was a major industry in the state of Maine right up until the last sardine factory closed, not only in Maine, but in the entire United States. Sardines are still being harvested, but most of them are being produced in plants in New Brunswick, and one of the largest plants is a part of the Bumblebee Corporation, and along with Tim and Fish here. But on the wall over there, you will see the stamp, the stencil for one of Stockton's sardine brands, the Chipmunk brand here. So, and Kathy and I was discussing, perhaps we could take that on Friday night at the time of this event and make because part of it is making a rubber stamp. So this Friday night at 5 p.m., so for you, those of you who go to bed early, Sierra's calling it Sip and Stamp, Sardine Can Print Making Party. So basically, what the idea is, you're going to create your own rubber stamp. The museum supplies all the materials. You get to carve out your own stamp, take that with you. But you're also going to be given a tote bag so you can put your stamp on there. So you're designing your own unique stamp here. So the cost is $30 with discounts for locals and PMM members. And so I believe that I strongly believe, might verify that the cost for Stockton and Searsport residents would be $24 or 20% off. And this would be held at 2 Church Street at the museum in Searsport, which is the old vestry building. And the event highlights include all carving tools, ink, rollers provided, freshly printed tote and your custom stamps to take home. Guest, and here now Deb's gonna like this, guest talk on historic can designs by Richard Saltstead, Junior Curator of the Maritime History, Simply Good. So Simply's gonna have a talk, that's good. And step-by-step guidance from artist and education intern Sierra. So if you're,
will the rest of the museum be open at that time?
What?
Will the rest of the museum be open,
No,
or just the one building?
Just that. The museum closes at 5. The museum's regular hours are 10 to 5, Tuesday through Saturday here. Okay, but you can come early and see the rest of the museum. Then come here. I have a few flyers here if you'd like them, and if you forget a flyer, just go to our website and it's located here.
And I posted it on the bulletin board as well.
Yes. We also have some flyers here many of you know Jack Staples? The electrician. Some of you, oh my goodness, you guys are missing out. Anyway, he's a great electrician. The reason I ask that is because the museum's development HR person, Shelley, happens to be his sister-in-law, and she's come up with this great new idea. It's called the POP studies, which is Preserve Our Past Studies, and there will be 3 opportunities to take these classes. One is going to be held this fall on the museum grounds. There is going to be a winter opportunity to take it online the winter opportunity is going to be in Belfast in conjunction with Senior College, and then next spring there's going to be a Zoom option here. But they're offering 5 programs. Organizing your photo collections, and that will be with Kevin Johnson, the photo archivist. Then Simply Good, the curator, again, is offering safely handling antique objects. A photo archivist, Matt Wheeler, is going to be doing intro to digitizing photos for cultural heritage. Simply will be offering storage of items in a historic house. And then Simply again will be giving another great one. I think I could really use this. How to preserve family letters, antiques, and heirlooms. So these are the projects the topics that are going to be offered. The first ones at the museum, I believe, if I went looking quickly, they're all on Fridays. I think 10 to 12, for what I saw even here. But once again, we have the flyers here, you can get that at penobscotmuseum.org, and this is part of the museum's continuing education program here, and there's phone numbers and emails to contact for more information as well. So again, just kind of those of us who are in history, looking at history, if any of these are interesting, here's some information.
And they're scheduled to be 2 hours.
Yes.
And they are $60, but again, we have a discount for Stockton, Searsport, and Penobscot Museum members.
Yes, exactly.
Are they gonna be virtual too?
And they will be virtual next spring. Okay, and Devin, if you go on the website, those dates will be coming up on shortly.
great.
They're already on there.
Oh, the dates, they did have those
Yes,
also.
I checked, cause I was curious.
Yes, in particular for me, I would like that hands-on with the person right there in the room, because that's the way I learn best, to handling things.
And I think most of them, the ones at the museum, have a smaller class size than the ones at the library.
Mm-hmm.
And the Zoom, it's, I guess, unlimited.
Exactly, so, something to think about right here. Oh, all right, so Joseph Plumb Martin. Just a little bit of just kind of getting, so I can get a feel of the room. What are some of the things that you might know about Joseph Plumb Martin? Yes.
Well, I know he was the town clerk.
He was.
For many years when we were Prospect.
Exactly, he was the town clerk. It was one of the roles he held. Anyone else know anything about Joseph Plumb Martin? Ralph?
Well, we know what stone's up there.
Yeah, we know his son's up there in Sandy Point. And
Whether he's under there, who he's buried there, I don't know.
well, that's a great question, Ralph. I'm not gonna touch that today, but I will say that for a long time, my house was one of the houses right next to that cemetery, and we would get knocks on the door. At other times, I would get, people would say, you live down there in Stockton, right? Well, what cemetery in Prospect is he buried in? And there would be people, particularly Liam Roden, who was a University of Maine professor for a number of years, and he had been looking for that grave all through Prospect. And I said, well, you know what? You know where I live, right? Yeah, I know where your house is. Well, I'll take you there. Show up one day, I'll take you there. But it is, because a lot of the, because in the book, the narrative of the Revolutionary Soldier, the information is given that, in the biography, that he's buried in Prospect. Well, if he was buried where he was buried, regardless, at that time, that was Prospect. So that's kind of it, but those are kind of things of that nature.
Just have a question.
Yes.
I know that stone is a replacement. Did people know whether he is actually buried in that spot or not?
I'm gonna reserve giving information for that.
Okay.
Okay, the reason for that is that, we are looking at some archaeological work in the greater Sandy Point area at this time, and it's under consideration by, Maine Preservation.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That would be fabulous.
Right, exactly, you know, and, there are professionals in the community who are looking at that. But we do, and that's a great, I really think that's a great way to kind of start off our talk, because one of the hardest things to figure out is exactly where he did live at the time he was here. He had various homes, and it's like, well, could it be here? Could it be there? And that's, again, in the state park, there's an idea that he could have been buried in land that is now encompassed by the state park. And there's archaeological work going there. Actually, there is an archaeological peer review going on before things are published on that. So it is an issue of where he is, and really a great issue of what roles geography play and what the concepts are. Yes.
Yeah, well, Gordon Thomas Ford's pretty sure he's there.
Well,
He wrote the ballad of him.
well,
Cited there from.
and again, Ralph, so we have a lot of oral history that comes to us. And the challenge now is to firm things up, because Martin himself died 1840s, almost 180 years ago, 175 years ago. Stories get passed down one person to another, and then so we're at that point of verifying. So what I have is kind of dealing, looking at this, and so what might people know about Fort Pownell during the French and Indian War? What happened to Fort Pownell? Does anyone know? What took it down? Yeah, go ahead. Well, actually, yeah.
The French? Didn't the French take it down?
The fort was built to push back the French and their Native American allies from the area. At that time, when Fort Pownell was built, there was really no British fortification north of Thomaston. British could not move further north because of the presence of the French and the Native Americans. And so Fort Pownell was built in 1759 to push this back. We were, at that time, it was just about the time that the Battle of Quebec was occurring up in Quebec City, and where the British were victorious, and and which eventually led to the surrender of the French in the area there. But you were absolutely right, the French were enrolled there here. So was it a fort with just a bunch of guys? Was that all that ended up there? They just kind of had the battle, the war was all, French and Indian War gets over in 1763, and they all go home?
A lot of them settled in Stockton.
A lot of them settled in Stockton, and
One
I
might.
believe it was you in 2010, Diane, that compiled the list of names from the roster of the soldiers at Fort Pownell, and names currently still on the tax rolls here in Stockton. And there's about 30 families?
And, I don't remember that because I've gone on down the thing.
Right, but there's quite a list.
Yeah, one was an ancestor of mine, the Clifford.
Yeah, the Cliffords, exactly, and so we have this, we do have this continuing legacy. Those are kinds of things. And some of you heard my husband Paul Bach's presentation last summer about the village at Fort Pownell. and many were surprised to learn, and I was surprised to learn the extent of how many people not only stayed, but how many buildings and businesses and how much agriculture that occurred between the 1763, the end of the French and Indian War, and the Penobscot expedition during the American Revolution in 1779. There was a community there, and one of the consequences of the Penobscot expedition in 1779 was that the Americans in their retreat actually razed and caused and more or less, if you will, destroyed the village that were there, and many of the British or loyalists had to leave because their homes were destroyed. Now that sounds like a prelude to Joseph Plumb Martin, but I wanted to give you an idea of what down there where the fort was looked like when Plumb Martin shows up here in 1784/85. Okay, so he's coming to an area that originally was British. There is great evidence that the British government was thinking of making, believe it or not, Cape Jellison the administrative center of a new province of New Ireland, which would extend east of the Penobscot River, joining into Nova Scotia, which also included New Brunswick at that time. And that the American Revolution and the destruction of the Penobscot, the issues of the Penobscot expedition, followed by the British surrender at Yorktown during the American Revolution, kind of thwarted that plan. So Martin, he's 17 years old when he enlists in the Continental Army. He went to town that day on his enlistment because story goes, is he wanted somehow to get away from doing farm chores on his grandfather's farm. And so there was another young man that he knew, and they decided they'd go to town and see what it was about, and he enlisted. And he stayed until literally the last shot was fired. He takes his soldier's pay, he does get a soldier's pay, and he ends up teaching outside of Binghamton, New York for a year. So Binghamton is the area, if you can imagine, the New York and Pennsylvania border, the long part there. So if you go to that southern end of New York, about halfway across, that is the general area. We know he teaches there for a year. At that time, he sells off his share that he was given, or his ticket he was given, for land in the Ohio country. He decides not to go to the Ohio country on his veteran's benefit, and he shows up here. He shows up. Great question to ask is, why? Why did he show up here? I don't know. Does anyone have an idea? If anyone has any ideas, why he just kind of show up here?
Be a woman.
Why? either chasing one or getting away from one.
I know.
And it could be. We don't know. Somehow there's no record of what motivated him here. We can speculate. We can speculate all we want, but he shows up.
Faith, do we know whether he was in a military unit that had anybody from Maine in it?
We don't, because we don't really, besides his father, who was a Congregationalist minister, who was defrocked, and his grandfather was also a Congregationalist minister, and they were from the Massachusetts, Connecticut area. So as to did he have anyone connected here, I don't know. But that's a great point. Is there somebody he might have met in his military travels that would have given him some information? When I think about his treatment of officers in his book and how he was not very fond of them, I don't think it was a fondness for Henry Knox. And if it was, that would be a tremendous irony, because, that was it, okay. Let's see now, so what we have here is Martin is born in 1760, so when he signs up for the military in 1776, he's 16 years old, and he's a British citizen. He's one at a time, he's part of the British Empire. And it's just about the time, his birth coincides almost exactly at the time when we're building Fort Pownell right down here to push back the French and the Native Americans. So kind of time stamp there, kind of give you some perspectives here. So he's a child born within the middle of the last of the French and Indian Wars here. Okay? And as I mentioned before, there were no British settlements north of Thomaston due to the problems with the French and Native Americans in this area. Where? Thomaston, north of Thomaston.
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 We
Okay.
just went by there, that's why.
Okay. Now, the other thing is, when he comes here in the mid-1780s, this is only 5 years after after revolutionary soldiers retreating from the British victory, and the Penobscot expedition having laid waste to much of the Fort Pownell village. I'm reading now because I'm going to give you some census figures. I want to make sure I get them right. The 1790 census prospect here. I said the 1790 census, conducted 6 years after Martin's arrival, records only 35 souls on Cape Jellison. So in 1790, we had 35 people living on Cape Jellison, and Martin's name was included in that 35. And again, just going to say again, many histories report the glory days of the Revolution and post-Revolution period. In reality, these days were not idyllic. Immediately following the conclusion of the war, Martin teaches school for 1 year in the frontier area around Binghamton, New York. He sells his soldier's land grant in the Ohio Company, reportedly receiving a small amount of cash. And it's after this period he appears on Cape Jellison in 1784, close to the time that the last British troops and approximately 600 loyalists are being removed from Castine to Nova Scotia. Also at this time, there is another person of note, is the Crawford family. During the period of time of the Fort Pownell village, there was a minister, Crawford, the last name Crawford, and he becomes pivotal. Crawford dies in 1776. We don't know how, but that it is during that time that the time when the church was burned on the Cape, and the church was a brick building. It was just not a lot of times we think about little log cabins all over the place. The community that was at Fort Pownell Village, as I said, had a brick church, and there was some substantial frame homes there. That's why we're looking for cellar homes, things of that nature there. Okay, so 600 and Crawford's family, the widow Crawford and her eldest son, never go to Nova Scotia. They actually just go across the bay to Castine, and in later years, she received a stipend for compensation for her losses on Cape Jellison from the British Army, and her son goes on and becomes one of the early shipbuilding or magnates, if you will, of Castine. And if you go to the Castine Cemetery, you can see their tombstones. They have what's the word I'm looking for? Not crypt. Above ground.
Mausoleum.
Yeah,
Mausoleum. Yeah, not great big one, but one for family mausoleum.
in the town cemetery?
In Castine. Yep. So if you could just go up
Yeah,
the
I've been
road.
there
Yeah.
100 times now.
Yeah. So
And I know there is at least one, I'm not.
so if you're looking into the road, it's way over on the left, about midway back there.
All right,
Okay. Yep.
yeah, it has to be with the old car.
Now, the other thing, talking about that cemetery, I'm gonna go off track here, the Castine Historical Society has been doing a great deal of research on African Americans living in Castine, and that is in that cemetery that they have been able to determine the locations of several early African American residents of Castine as well. And so it's well worth going over to see the Castine Historical Society and get a map to see where that is. Okay, now we're gonna go, okay, so I'm gonna quote now from Alice Ellis's book, because I never wanna get her wrong here. And this is her book, The History of Prospect, Maine, not the Stockton Springs, Maine. She provides us with a comprehensive list of Martin's service to the communities beginning in 1789. It is notable that the U.S. Constitution was ratified in 1788, and Washington was elected president in 1789. Ellis documents Martin's signature in an appeal to the Massachusetts General Court to change the name of the area which include the modern-day areas of Frankfort, Prospect, Stockton Springs, Winterport, Hamden, Searsport, along with parts of Belfast, Newburgh, and Monroe. That whole area was known as Frankfort, but in 1789 they wanted to change it to Knoxborough. You know, he signed that petition, so maybe he was fond of Knox at that time. That will all change. Okay. In 1794, Martin's name is listed as one of the incorporators of the new town of Prospect, which included present-day Prospect, Stockton Springs, which was referred to as South Prospect, Sandyport, and part of Searsport, known as West Prospect. In 1781, this is slightly before Martin shows up, that whole area of what we now know as the extended Prospect there had a population of about 100 people.
A lot of legislation for 100 people.
Well, I know. By 1794, the population had risen to 886 people. Okay, so in a 13-year period, it increased almost 9 times. So we're in growth, and here's Martin, among others, right in the thick of it. The population in 1820, at the time of statehood, is approximately 1,800. So it's doubled from that 800 within another 20 years, which almost doubles by the time by 1840, with the U.S. recording a population of 3,500. So by 1840, we're at 3,500. And again, so we're looking at growth, which is really something. It is. And you know, the thing is with that is that it is from the period of about 1860 to 1880, we had, due to an effect of a volcano in another part of the world, that we had 1 year, in particular, 1816, summer of 1816 was known as the year without a summer, because that year it snowed every year, and then there was not much relief in the other surrounding years, and then there was a series, you know, in part perhaps because there was not good nutrition of crops, but there was a succession of rolling pandemics. The pandemics could be part of malnutrition, but it could also the fact that we were starting to have a more vibrant shipping business with sailors coming both in and out of the area, people bringing things back. So you're looking at population growth at a time when there are factors lowering the population. Yes.
Basically, that's 2 generations.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So that, you know, so he's here at this time, and I know some of these numbers get kind of dry and things, but it helped me to put it in perspective. Says, what was this? You know, what was it like to live here? You know, what was he doing here?
A lot of
Was
French
the
came
vol-
under the French Revolution, and then under Napoleon. I'm sure lots of people were fleeing France at that point.
Yeah.
And to, you know, the northern part, French areas and so on.
And you know, that was a really great point too. And it's funny when you look at French migration,
Yeah.
you know, in the United States, you see a lot of French migration in the area around New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland. Way after the Revolution, actually, one of Napoleon's nephews has an estate on the Delaware River on the New Jersey side. just
Really?
over- Yes, exactly. And I read a found a
Nephew.
wonderful book a couple of years ago called the Napoleons in America. And it was quite fascinating how after, because that was after the Revolution and the Republic, but, you know, how much that was there. And
Well, I
that-
was
that's
just
where I got
thinking,
all
but
that
there was so
information.
much French going on up here, you know? and
Well,
So,
also Hilo, shortly before the American Revolution, and because during the French and Indian War, a lot of the French of Eastern Canada, the Acadians, were deported to various parts of the world as
Yes.
well. So
yes.
that was it, and so and a lot of times it was Scottish farmers that were brought into Eastern Canada to take over their lands.
My goodness.
Yeah, but yeah, it's true, because you are in upheaval here, and, you know, and someday you and I can talk about the revolutions of 1848 and what that, from Europe, and how that affected US migration, but that's another topic for us. And so Martin finds himself in this rapidly growing community in which he serves as a public official for decades. Again, I'm gonna quote this because I wanna get it right. He served as first select, again, this is Prospect, okay? He dies before Stockton incorporates. He served as first selectman in 1799 and 1817. He served as second selectman from 1802 to 1807. Again in 1812 to 1814, right there in the middle of the War of 1812. Again in 1718 to 1818. And from 1818 to 1843, he was the town clerk.
Wow.
Okay.
I see him.
At various times, he holds the position of captain in the local militia. That was during the War of 1812, the burning of Belfast, and the Battle of Hamden, and as a representative to the Massachusetts General Court. Now, I don't think he ever went to Massachusetts to be in the General Court, and from what I've been looking up this position a lot, and all I can think of is, for those of you who grew up in this town or this area, if you happen to know Harold Perkins and all the local offices that he held, like as constable and deputy sheriff and holder of records, it just kind of like, you know, it was so, for Harold it was like, well, if somebody in town, county, or state government kind of needed, to know what, who we can rely on for something in the town or to do something of tremendous service, it would be like Harold. I think that was it, you know. At that time, it was also before Maine became a state and therefore was part of Massachusetts, so there were just general things there. So again, he's holding all these public positions. During his first few years living on Cape Jellison, he lived in a cabin with a woman whose name was lost to history. Now, someone said it has to do with a woman before they had, that's Hilo. But we just don't know. It's reported that it was several years, there was an abandoned cabin, or he got permission from the owner to stay in this cabin, and there was a woman who lived there. But he does eventually marry, and he marries a woman, Mary, who is the daughter of Isaac Cluley, who happened to be the head of the armaments, if you will, at Fort Pownell for about 16 years. And when his father, I took my shoes off also. I have a loose heel on my shoe, excuse me, I don't want to be tripping over this. But it was, during this time, we talk about Plumb Martin being an artist. This is a, if you will, oh, sorry. Would you mind just trying to hold this out here? What we have here is, this is a copy of a plan that Plumb Martin made of Fort Pownell, based upon the information he got from his father-in-law, Isaac Cluley, who was the head of the armory at Fort Pownell for 16 years. So, and thankfully, because if my memory serves correctly from what Paul and Kathy have said, is that Mr. Cluley was close to 70 when he gave Martin's these plans here. So this is what we have. So it's because of this and Martin's ability with his draftsmanship to give us an idea before, this is what we have right here. This is a private poster, but the library also has one. And Kathy, am I correct in remembering, it was from this plan that we were able to build a model of the
I believe so.
model of the, so we do have a model of a fort, an Eagle Scout project that's a model of the fort in the next room.
Do we still have the plans upstairs?
Yes, we do have the plans upstairs, yeah, so there they are.
The Eagle project was done to refurbish it. It
Right.
was actually done by, I think Arthur French, a Mr. French anyway,
Okay.
and given to Walt Trundy.
Yeah, give it to Walt Chunky, thank you very much for that clarification.
He was from Sandy Farm. And then it grew the.
Yeah.
Yes. So in 1794, about 10 years after he arrives here, he married a shipwright, landowner, and former master of the armaments of Fort Point. He married his daughter is not married, is Lucy. So 10 years after arriving here, he's marrying into a family that has long credibility in the town here. And in addition to being in charge of the armory at the fort, he's also a shipwright. Lucy and Joseph will eventually have 5 children. But when they were newly married, the young couple were mutually appointed guardians of Thomas Goldthwaite's widowed daughter, Mary. Okay. Thomas Goldthwaite had been a commander at the fort. Mary was deemed incapable of taking care of herself, attributed to the accidental death of her husband, shortly followed by the death of their infant daughter. It was also around this time that her father was lost at sea. After Fort Pownell, he went back to England, still an officer, and on his way back to North America to take a post in Nova Scotia, his ship went down. So this woman, on top of having her husband dying on her through an accident, it's reportedly an axe slipped and he severely severed his foot or cut his foot. And after losing a child, also dealing with the loss of her father, it would be a stress on anyone. During this term of guardianship, the Martins lived in Mary's house. Upon Mary's death, the Martins continued to live in her small home, which many believe to be part of an existing home on McKinney Road, and a farmstead which extended from the home to the Penobscot River. The Martins, like many of their neighbors, found themselves in legal conflict with former Secretary of War, General Henry Knox, whose wife inherited the Waldo patent covering close to 900 square miles. The Martins' land was reduced to 4 acres. A significant amount of the reduction was due to Martins being unable to pay assessments levied by Knox's agents, despite Martin's position in the community. So if I remember correctly, Martin was assessed around $175. And so Knox said, "This is my land, granting it for his wife." What?
That was a huge amount at that time.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. So he was down to 4 acres.
It's interesting that he didn't inherit money from Mr. Goldthwaite, who obviously would have had some money from the position that he was in.
Or Mr. Clue, or maybe Mr. Cluey, who was his father. He was
Yes,
talking about his
yes.
father-in-law. That is a good point. I think that might be yes. He how can I say? Cluey had other children, and there may have been
Yeah.
some issues there because he has sons as well. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. In 1818, the Belfast court valued Martin's net worth of total property to be worth $52, including land and livestock. The court further approved Martin as deserving a hardship veterans pension of $8 a month, noting that his only other income was $96 a year, garnered by his position as town clerk. The 2 sources of income would be worth about $5,000, a year according to one inflation calculation model. You know. Some of the issues with Selectman and Town Clerk Martin had to address were the ongoing were the organizing of operations for a new municipality, the British return in 1814, including the burning of Belfast, the occupation of Castine and the Battle of Hampden, also in 1814, the year without a summer, leading to widespread crop failure throughout the region and depopulation, aggravating a series of numerous rolling pandemics, the town elections concerning statehood, as well as the many changes experienced as the area developed in the first half of the 1800s. By the way, only 4 Prospect citizens voted against statehood in the final vote. That's it. They wanted to get no Massachusetts for that. That was it. Man, even though Martin did not live long enough to see Stockton separate from Prospect, I suspect he was aware of the possibility as Searsport had separated in 1845. Has anyone ever visited the Searsport Congregationalist Church? The First Congregationalist
Yeah.
Church, okay? And can anyone remember the name of the first minister in the current building there? He was there for 40 years.
Oh, gosh.
Was it Thurston?
It was Thurston, that's correct. Now, Martin, through a series of alliances, Martin was one of these men who seemed to know a lot of people. And very shortly after he came here, he made the acquaintance of the minister in Blue Hill by the name of Jonathan Fisher. And some of you may have read the diary of Jonathan Fisher. Well, Fisher was not only the Congregationalist minister for Blue Hill, but for this entire section going from the Blue Hill Peninsula up into maybe the area of where Belfast is today, and then kind of, if you look at Bucksport, going up to Hampden. Well, one of Fisher's students, both coming out of Harvard or trainees, was Stephen Thurston, and Plumb Martin and Thurston really formed a lifetime friendship. And I was hoping today to bring an artifact from a home in Searsport, or a photograph of it, but as it turned out, the owner was uncomfortable of letting it out of the house, and it was a big. I'll tell you, it was a big ask, because this is a value here. But this is where I'll talk about that in a little bit here. Martin made the acquaintance of the congregational minister, the Reverend Jonathan Fisher in Blue Hill, who oversaw the Congregationalist flock of the Upper Penobscot Bay region. He later met and formed a decade-long friendship with the young minister Stephen Thurston, who was under the Reverend Fisher's tutelage. This friendship included the period of Reverend Thurston's dedication of a new Congregationalist church in Searsport in 1825, and the establishment of the Sandy Point Congregationalist Church in 1839. Martin wrote a dedication hymn for the opening of the Sandy Point Church, and his wife, Mrs. Lucy Martin, was a founding member of the Sandy Point congregation. Now, right by Julie there, I have several artifacts of the hymn that Martin wrote for the dedication. So we have the words there. We actually have it. We have not been able to authenticate if the one we have of paint in ink is actually Martin's handwriting or somebody else. Originally, the hymn was sung to the hymn Naomi, but in later years, it's now sung to the hymn Amazing Grace, because Martin did not leave any musical notation at the time, so that was it. Martin's appreciation of Thurston led him to write an acrostic poem enumerating Thurston's fine qualities as a man and a religious leader. Now that was what I wanted to bring, because there is a person in it's a Searsport private home. Again, it's private possession here, but he has a framed illustrated version of that acrostic poem that Martin wrote. I've seen it, and I've been invited to the home here, but here. Martin was known for other artistic talents, such as being an amateur naturalist, producing paintings of birds and flowers. Nearing the age of 70, he created a detailed architectural plan of Fort Pownell based upon information he received from his father-in-law, Isaac Cluley, which is available for viewing today. Notice that there. Okay. Now, and history often focuses on larger-than-life individuals credited with affecting the course of great events while ignoring the everyday actions of ordinary individuals. However, it is often these overlooked individuals and their actions who slowly affect great change. And I think Martin is a perfect example of that. You know, he's the ordinary soldier. He comes up here where we're recovering from war, helps reestablish a community. You know, living most of that time in poverty, and still serving, and still going on. You know, writing hymns, making maps, writing poems, arts, things of that nature. And so, very, very close to the end of his life is when he writes the book about his adventures as a private soldier throughout the war, and that was, primarily to raise money to sustain his family here.
Which leads me, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
leads to the question. Do you know what engagements or what campaigns he fought in during the Revolutionary War?
Oh, yes, you go through the book. It's impossible to say he was in every battle, but he was there from the beginning to the end. So, you would see most of Washington's campaigns in New York. He was in Monmouth, Brandywine, Trenton, Maryland. I mean, it's the gamut. He's following Washington's command himself. You know, so you don't see him in all the battles, because you couldn't be there going at the same time. But we do have copies of the book. The book is available, readily available. I don't know if we have any left here to sale, but it's under different. I should say there have been different editions of the book in terms of different historians writing the introduction, what have you. John Curtin Martin did a treatment around 2010 called, Ordinary Courage. Private Yankee Doodle is another version of the book.
Oh,
But
really?
it's a read. Now, it's not battle plans per se. It's like this is me as a soldier, and this is, and it's a lot of it's the hardships they did, that they went through as an ordinary soldier, and he throws a few little jabs at the officers and what have you. Well, I consider after Knox almost made him a pauper, that might have affected his way as well, so I kind of wonder about that too. And again, the Martin family's service continued through many generations in our community. Many of us know Walt Trunting, who served as the town clerk for decades. Martin's publication was all but forgotten until the mid-20th century, when a copy was found within the private collection of Lloyd Smith by Francis Reynolds, the superintendent of the Morristown National Historic Park in Morristown, New York. It was a private publication. When you look at the book, the original book, it doesn't say by Joseph Plumb Martin, it says by himself. His name, I'm the private soldier, perhaps because maybe then no one could say it, get back at him and say, what did you say that for? That didn't happen, but that was it.
Was his Morristown, New York or New Jersey?
New Jersey, down, yeah.
So that was the site of a lot of the
Jockey
Revolutionary
Hollow.
War activity. I lived right in that area, and I can remember.
And he was there, and he was at
Yeah.
Jockey Hollow for a while.
Wow.
Yeah, he was at Jockey Hollow for a
Yeah.
while. Now, that original copy, the copy that we found is now in the house in the Museum of the American Revolution in Philadelphia. So again, so the book itself gave us a wonderful view of the life of we'll say the ordinary soldier, the foot soldier, and their viewpoint of things, which is quite a big difference than the histories we get on the generals and the commanders and the command decisions here. And I realize I don't like reading so much from text, but there are times I do, only because I want to get my numbers right, especially here. If you're further interested in what was going on with the Waldo Patton, and it was not only Henry Knox and the Waldo Patton, but there were a number of other large landowners or great proprietors in Maine. This book, written about 20 years ago now, Liberty Men and the Great Proprietors, written by Alan Taylor, details a lot of what was going on with these land surveyors. Gardner, Winslow, Hollowell, and so on here. And Liberty Men is not only for, it's kind of a double purpose word here, because it's not only about the Liberty Men who fought for liberty, or the soldiers here, but there is actually major incidents in what we now know as Liberty, Maine, where the townspeople, they rose up. I mean, this became a time of vigilante, and these poor Knox, these poor surveyors or agents of Knox going into these towns, not literally took their lives in their hands. One of those surveyors was actually killed and quite a few were really quite badly beaten here. Different perspectives of things here. And Kathy and I, what have we done with Alan Taylor?
We got to eat lunch with him.
We did. I'm so glad that happened. In 2019, in preparation for the Maine Bicentennial in 1820, Kathy and I went to a 3-day conference at the University of Maine in Orono. It was a wonderful conference. Professor Taylor spoke here, and we go and we sit at this lovely little table at our lunch. We have our lunch, and who comes to join us? But Alan Taylor, and it was really nice. We had a lovely conversation with him, and Professor Roden came with us too. That's true. Yeah, so it was a great time.
And we found out he had been one of the campers at Tally Ho. He and his sister.
Now he's just about my age, so when you think of, so kind of put that back there and,
What was his sister's name, do you know?
He only referred to her, I think, as his sister.
But one other thing I do have over here, I'm gonna leave these out for a little while. Some of them belong to my husband, and some of them belong to the St. John Congregationalist Church, things of that nature here. But I do have, if you're interested, a map. Now, this was not done at the time, I believe this was done in 1894 based on deeds and records of the old time here. But it does show not only where Joseph Plumb Martin's home was, but some of the, not so much Cape Jellison, but we have a lot in Cape Jellison, but the areas going toward Sandy Point and Powdertown Road.
Yeah, it has to be based on the early 1800s, because at that time, Cape Jellison is listed as heirs of Robert Hitchman.
Right, exactly. Right, so if anyone is interested in looking at this and where things are, I always like to try to figure out where my house is.
Yeah, I meant to ask you,
Yeah.
who was the eldest family in Sandy Point?
Oh, man, I would go back, I'm gonna say, if I had to give an answer on the spot, I'd look at the Odom family. Cause it's Odom, O-D-O-N. John Odom had his mill.
Odom's Ledge, right?
Of Odom's Ledge, so so John Odom's mill down where we used to call Perkins Cove down there at the end, was mapped by a British survey team as early as on a 1762 map done by the British survey team when they were here at Fort Pownell. Right, so there may have been others in the area.
There is a house on Steamboat Wharf Road, which you turn down to go towards French's Point.
That would be the manse.
Yeah, that's the manse, and that's from the 1600s. The first little building, they're just renovating it now, is the original building, and then that was built in the 1600s sometime, I was told.
We have that. We may have to do some fact checking on that.
Yeah, and then they moved
because
the house.
there weren't English around at that time.
Yeah. Well, it's supposed to, I was told it was the earliest.
It's supposed to be the oldest house in the town,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, so-
But existent.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yes.
existent, one that's still up.
Yeah,
So there could have been other homes
of course,
earlier,
oh
right?
yes, oh yes.
So we have to, yeah, it's very tricky navigating
Yeah, of course, those early.
oral history.
Yeah.
This is where the archaeology comes in.
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
you know, it's very, you know, I'm really thinking it's,
So do
you
you
know, it's
think
really
the one on
possible.
the left when you go down on the?
Across
on the right?
from where Charlie.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
right,
that,
Jack
Right across the
Gardner's
street.
that has been, yeah.
Yeah, Jack,
Yeah.
or Jack Gardner.
Yeah, and that looked
Yeah,
quite
yeah.
different in the
But,
seventies.
You know, Stephanie, the reason I'm hesitating, because at that time, Castine was a trading post, the French had been there first, but in the 1660s, you did have some British come up.
Yeah.
But that's, you know, that's Castine, so we have to really kind of,
Yeah, I
Get-
don't
get
know,
into
I
it.
don't know personally, this is just anecdotal,
yeah.
which is dangerous in history, but that I was told the original little cottage house, which they're just renovating, it sits next to that, the manse, was originally down toward the beach, and it was moved back up in the 1600s to where it sits now, and then the manse was built.
I don't doubt that building,
Yeah.
the small building was down by the beach.
Yeah.
And it looked different in
Oh,
the
oh.
seventies when I was here, that's where Charlie and Bobby used to live.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know?
because
So
otherwise
that
they
was a
don't.
smallish house and there were
Yeah,
shelves in there, that's, I remember. He said, if I take those out, the house
Stephanie,
would fall
we'll
apart.
just, you know, we have to kind of.
Like,
go-
that's what I
go
remember.
back.
I'm just, I
That
don't know if
thick
it's true or not.
in the wall.
It does, and it's, you know, sometimes you're dealing with numbers and one thing becomes another, so.
Absolutely, yeah, I'm very familiar with that.
Yeah, yeah.
They do
I wonder if Bob Brooks did anything on that finance itself. I'll have to, you know what, I'm gonna look in Bob Brooks' files that we have here and see if he mentions that.
Mm.
It sits on steel rails.
This book,
Oh, I'm sorry.
this book is one that I learned so much about Waldo County and Knox County history that I never learned in school. I had read in Alice Ellis's book about how so many of the people were considered squatters after the Revolution, the people who were down on Cape Jellison and up in Sandy Point, and I'm thinking, well, why is that? They had bought their land legally from the original proprietors, but those people, for the most part, were considered English loyalists, and after the Revolution, the land ended up either going to a patriotic, high-income person or a patriotic descendant. And the courts in Boston declared all of the land that had been bought legally before the Revolution from people who became loyalists as being null and invalid. And they had to all either buy their land over again
Or leave.
or leave.
So that was Waldo County already? at that
Waldo,
time?
no, Waldo County was not Waldo County at that time,
Okay.
but it's the area that became Waldo County and Knox County. And it is amazing what went on. And most of the people who lived here didn't make enough money to go to Boston, to go to court and fight for the land that they
Yeah,
had
I read about that.
bought.
Because I know that if you go through the Registry of Deeds books, you know, page after page after page of farmers buying their property that they lived on for 20 years from Henry Knox, almost always for about $100. I mean, that was the, and I mean, literally pages and pages and pages of them.
Yes,
Most of Islesboro, all those people had to buy their farms back,
yeah,
and all Lincolnville and all that area, that's where I was looking at the deeds.
yes.
But they were, you know, they came into town and everybody marched in, and how they ever came up with $100, they must have been all borrowing it from somebody, and but most of them did in fact I mean, the deeds are in there, so they were the ones that paid the $100.
And that was less than what was asked for originally, because Bob Brooks was the first one I had ever heard use the term quieting deeds.
Mhm.
That eventually they decreased the amount that they were asking. And part of that was because of all the stuff that was going on in the back country in the two counties.
Well, the other part of it, the irony of it is they moved into empty land that was worth nothing.
Yeah.
They built a whole farm, and then they get assessed for
Everything
the
that they've
price of the
done
farm
for
that they built
improvements.
themselves. I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
I mean, talk about unfair. I mean, if
Yeah.
you asked for the money for the land, you know, when it was empty land, that would have been one story. But the very idea that you have to buy your own work,
The
your own
development
labor.
cost, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, the
That's why they
development
got
cost, that's
shocked in plenty places.
That's
Oh,
what
wow.
happened to a lot of people in inland Maine who are built houses, pretty high-end houses on land that they thought they had a 50-year lease or a 100-year lease from paper companies.
Mhm.
And the paper companies kept renewing and renewing, and all of a sudden it stopped. And then they said, if you want your house, you've got to buy it. And the property
Yeah.
with it.
Yeah, we had one of my great uncles up around the area of Grand Lake Stream was on paper company land.
Yes.
Same thing happened. Same thing happened. And that was, that was like, I would say 1970, 1972, something.
Wow.
Like
That
that.
people
Yeah,
get
yes.
screwed every time.
That's right, that's right.
Legalized stealing.
There's been a lot of that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank
And in a little bit, we will have refreshments, but they will need to be brought out, and some of the things that Faith has laid out, we may want to move into the other rooms.
Yes, I would say.
Yeah, and I would like to remind everybody that there are still raffle tickets.
That's
good.
right.
Good, good. And please, if you have not signed the attendance, please do so. I think everybody